USA. They've sucked the joy out of the World Cup.
Everything's like happening as we feared. FIFA, their whole ethos, the remit is to make as much money as possible.
We're seeing people being excluded from this World Cup. We're seeing fans priced out of this World Cup because of the people that are kind of like, pigs in the troughs, really getting their hands dirty on what's supposed to be, as I mentioned, our game.
In the long history of FIFA being a farce, we see Infantino now taking it to new levels.
I think the Americans see it as, no, this is our World Cup. For 6 weeks, we're in charge. It's our thing. You've got to do things our way.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. The World Cup was always used by authoritarian regimes to wash their reputations in a 6-week festival of football, toning down their more repressive tendencies for the period. Think Russia, Qatar, Mussolini's Italy. But Trump's America has little interest in pretending to be anything other than itself. Border controls, immigration crackdowns, hyper-commercialism, eye-watering ticket prices, and a game of 4 quarters as ad breaks are dressed up as hydration breaks. So will security and profits squeeze the joy out of the greatest show on earth, or will we tune it out, focus on the football, and enjoy it all once again? I'm joined by our very own Jordan Jarrett-Bryan, superfan Billy the Bee Grant, who's in Mexico right now, and by sports journalist Marcela Mora y Araujo. Billy, let's start with you because you're out in Mexico. I mean, there is just a series of disastrous stories about this tournament before it begins. How irritated are you before it starts, as it starts?
Oh, you don't even start me on this. I've been so irritated. I could tell you so much. I mean, this is my 9th World Cup, and I was so looking forward to coming to this World Cup. It should have been my 10th, but when my first World Cup was in Italia 90, but then when England didn't qualify for the 94 World Cup in the USA, I didn't go, despite my family all living out here, so I had a home to stay in. My brother went to World Cup matches, but I was a bit like, oh, England aren't there, I'm not going to go. And I heard that the USA World Cup in 94 was really good, especially as probably your team wasn't there. So you didn't have those kind of those negativities that you might have if your team gets knocked out. So I heard it was great. So I said to myself, next time the World Cup comes to the USA, I'm so looking forward to it. Family, friends, I go and watch a lot of MLS football out here as well. So out in America. So I was really looking forward to it. And I remember with our friends, we decided when we were going to come out, we said, tell you something, we're going to come to this World Cup. We're looking forward to it. But also, I've been to Mexico, and I said to Mexico is a great country, lovely people, and they're really into football. So tell you what we'll do. Let's fly out to Mexico because it's cheaper in Mexico to stay, to live. As you can see, I've got this penthouse apartment here. £30 a night each of us are paying for our room. Things like that. So we thought, let's come out to Mexico. Let's spend a little time here. Then if England are playing in America, we could fly in and out from there. So that was our plans. We booked a year before the actual draw. So we were coming out here anyway. When the draw happened, bang, all of a sudden we found out those ticket prices were ridiculous amounts. And a lot of the people of our crew that were coming, one by one, they just started dropping out. We're not coming. We can't make it. Oh, no. And for me, that was the biggest disappointment because for me, the World Cup, it's not about what FIFA do and all that stuff. It's about the fans and it's about the football. And I've met so many people from around the world going to, Brazil, going to Japan, who have become lifelong friends. And they all go to the matches. We all meet in World Cups together every 4 years, okay? And all of a sudden, a lot of these people aren't coming because they either say it's too expensive, it's too difficult, or as somebody said, this World Cup, and they say the USA. They don't say the USA and Canada and Mexico because it's all focused on the USA. They've sucked the joy out of the World Cup. So them trying to plan how they're going to get here, in the end, they said, I just can't do it. I'm not going to do it. So that, for me, is the biggest disappointment.
All right, well, we'll come back to the fans' experience in a moment. But, Marcela, there's an awful lot of politics.
There always is, I think, especially in the build-up. A lot of this week I've seen people saying, I'm not feeling anything yet. There's something wrong with this World Cup. Well, the feeling is the result of the game. It's football that makes us feel. Everything else is add-ons. This is a particularly interesting one because, as you said, it's not a government that's trying to sports wash through an image. It's a super transparent government at its horrendous attitude. So we've already seen all the things that people feared playing out. You know, the Somalian referee, journalists from all over the world are posting clips. You know, a Brazilian journalist was saying she was asked to lift her hair, which is apparently a trope they do a lot at the customs for women, black women with big hair. Everything's like happening as we feared. It's not. It's not a fantasy.
And I've just come back from Iran, and obviously there's the extraordinary story of the Iranian team having to base themselves in Mexico and go in for day trips for their matches, and half their technical staff not allowed in.
Exactly, and we've had professionals that are involved with FIFA in a professional capacity not being allowed in. That's a first, and a host country at war with a participating nation is also a first. And those are geopolitical firsts that are shocking, actually. And I guess, it sounds correct to say, well, let's just wait for the football and see how Iran play, because it's horrendous. But Iran-US has always been a World Cup fixture where geopolitics plays in the background. And if you remember, Qatar was super sensitive, and there was the thing of the players not singing the national anthem. Some of the flags, the Iranian flags, didn't have the right kind of insignia because they were protesting. But also something happens, and I think that's the power of football, really, the true power, which is what our friend in Mexico is enjoying. It's football has to do with people's look for joy in life. Not everything is working hours, working conditions, career ladder. The right to have a good time is super important. And football has managed to give us that universally to as broad a range of people as possible. So when the joy kicks in, which is when the ball starts rolling, really, you can't get the feeling without the art. You have to see the piece itself. I do think joy will come from this. There's some nerdy technical things that I think, for me, it will never be the same again. Like 4 quarters, I can't stand that, or more than 90 minutes. But then I was remembering my father never got over the fact that draws went on to penalty shootouts, because he was used to something else. He said, why don't they just get the goalkeepers to play tennis against each other? It's so random. So football evolves and changes, and we adapt with it. I think some of the Americanisms that are happening here are, will never go back, like the 4 quarters or the half-hour, half-time at the final. That might stay forever. But I do think the transparency, the blatant openness with which the horrible stuff is happening. I grew up in Argentina. My first World Cup was 1978. There was a terrible dictatorship. The issue of whether or not to boycott the World Cup had come up time and time again. In the end, nobody wanted to boycott it, not even the dissidents who were suffering the worst consequences of the military regime's abuses. And we had a month of joy, and I remember that very clearly as a happy time. And I'm glad it wasn't banned. And you could say, how could you enjoy a football game when something else was going on? Yeah. Well, you can, and that's the point of pleasure and joy, that it can happen amidst horror. And I do really believe in the power of football to give us that, to give all humans that. Kids, some people will be priced out of the stadium, but no kid will be priced out of kicking a ball around.
Jordan, to some extent, this is part of the build-up to any World Cup, isn't it? Sort of moaning about it, and trying to pick the holes in the politics and all the rest of it. But there is something different about this one. It feels very different to Qatar, which was controversial in a totally different way. And we saw broadcasters kind of, slightly embarrassingly apologizing for being there and, not really knowing what to say. Just slightly awkward monologues from certain presenters. This is a different ballgame, and it's not what we expected when America was awarded the competition. This is kind of something that we might have foreseen over the last few months, but it's not what the America World Cup was supposed to be.
No, it's not. And I think you're right. I compare World Cups and Olympics, and what you said there, leading up to them, there's generally something controversial leading up to it. Often there's always people criticizing, various Olympic games and World Cups for a variety of reasons. And, often you get to those games, be it a World Cup or Olympics, and normally the football, as Marcela was saying, brings the joy, and people for that 5-6 weeks at least can park all the controversies and politics to one side. But this one does feel different. I think it feels different for a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, on a footballing level, I think we're seeing the rise of domestic and European club football at a time where we're seeing the demise, if you like, of international football. If you look at it from an England football fan point of view, the Premier League is at its most competitive. We've just seen the likes of, Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, these relatively small clubs competing for, and in some cases getting into Europe. You want to see the best football. It's not the World Cup or the Euros, it's now the Champions League. So I think we're seeing the ascent of club football at the same time as we're seeing international football on the decline. Italy haven't qualified now for three back-to-back World Cups. They still are a powerhouse international game. There isn't an obvious great international team this World Cup. I know France and Spain are the favourites, but yeah, there's no one there that I think you can that's the team I want to see play. They're the team that I'm excited about. But I think it's also on a non-footballing level, to the points that Billy and Marcelo have both said as well. I think politically, everybody's seeing the blatant money grab that we're seeing. Football and money have always had a difficult relationship, but there's the blatant money grab we're seeing from the people that are supposed to be protecting the game. And it's the people that are the main stakeholders, i.e. the football fans, that are missing out. We're seeing people being excluded from this World Cup. We're seeing fans priced out of this World Cup. So I think when you combine people's club teams are entertaining them more than their national teams, alongside the political and cultural umbrella that's going around this particular World Cup, it's no surprise to me that this one does feel in a kind of different bracket to other controversial World Cups we've seen in the past.
And in the long history of FIFA being a farce and accused of all sorts of terrible things over the years, we see Infantino now taking it to new levels.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
Well, I think we all thought that Sepp Blatter was the pinnacle of a president of FIFA that most football fans saw as the archetypal greedy, just horrible. Just the game was in his hands, and we saw him as the person that was ruining the game for pure football fans. And I think Infantino's gone one step further beyond that now. I think again his blatant. And he's lying of what he sees as the world's game with agendas that clearly are serving particular nations and particular leaders, I think has really sullied what is, and it's a quote here, and it's a bit of a phrase often used, the beautiful game. And I think when people are seeing how this current FIFA leadership are treating the world's game at a time when the World Cup's meant to be everybody's game, we should all be included in this. I think the build up 2, 3, 4 years now, we don't see this World Cup in the same way because of the people that are kind of pigs in the troughs, really getting their hands dirty on what's supposed to be, as I mentioned, our game. They're bringing it to a very select group of people in organisations that can and will benefit from this World Cup.
Billy, when immigration is so central to the controversies around this World Cup and the US border, are you sure you're going to get in?
It's funny you should say that, actually, because I was just thinking, I told a couple of my friends that I was coming on to Channel 4, and I told them that they're talking about some points which actually really resonate with me. So, normally when I go into news programs and I talk to people about football, I talk about the joy of football, and no one, touches too massively on the points that we're touching on here. And they were saying to me, not being funny, you're not in the country yet. Do you really think you should be going on TV and talking about this? Because you might not get in. Now, I've got my visa. I'm going to put out there. I've got my ESTA. I used to have a green card in America. My family lives here. If I'm thinking, right, I'm going to a country, and if I'm a country that talks about free speech the whole time, and we're sitting down there and we're having a very, very sensible discussion about football and certain things and how this World Cup is very different from others. Now, if the points that I now make... I have a fear that the fact is that they don't like what I'm going to say and not let me into the country. To me, that's a real big problem for a country who keeps on talking about free speech. Now, coming back to what you're saying about sort of kind of visas at the moment, like I said, I've got an ESTA. It's not been revoked. I've learned there's quite a few Scottish fans that have had their ESTAs revoked. You've had Haitian fans who can't get visas. You've got referees who can't get visas. It's really weird because what you've got is almost like you've got this kind of different sort of circus going around this World Cup, which is completely and utterly taken away from the football. And again, this is why a lot of my friends are sort of saying, you know, for me, this is like hard work because going to a World Cup, most of the hard work as a fan should be going into how am I going to get a cheaper flight? How am I going to get the cheapest accommodation? Where can I go to get, food so that it's not going to cost me an arm and a leg? What games am I going to go to, not going to go to? These are the questions. What people are going to meet? Where am I going to hang out? Where's the best atmosphere going to be? These are the questions that should be asked. And these are the things that should be sort of the host countries should be concentrating on. I'm very, very lucky I made a decision to come to Mexico. And the reason why I went yesterday to the opening game. I didn't go to the game itself because tickets were £1,000. I ain't paying £1,000, and that's face value for it to go and see a team that I don't really support. But I went to the fan park in Mexico. It was unbelievable. The fans, the atmosphere in that game. I was there in my England shirt with all my friends. All the Mexicans are coming up to us, shaking our hands, talking about Harry Kane. They want to know how we're getting on. And for me, I'm thinking, this is what it's about, because it's just like what Marcelo was saying. It's like when it comes down to it, the tournament starts. The football happens. I spoke to a lot of people. They're not happy with America. Obviously, the way that America treats Mexico as well as Mexican people, but not every American, but, in general, there's a real negativity. So they're saying no, but they're saying, but we're so proud for this World Cup to be in Mexico. We are the hosts. We have won the first game. And for us, this means everything. You know what I'm saying? And that for me is important because we keep talking about FIFA and FIFA World Cup. To me, it's not the FIFA World Cup, it's the World Cup. That FIFA have attached themselves to it and they're organising it. And what FIFA, to me, have done, they've just created all this additional stuff onto football, which it's just upsetting because they've kind of upset the balance between what the sport should be about. The commercialism, I haven't got a problem with commercialism. Listen, if somebody's doing a job and doing a good job, of course you should commercialise it, but the balance has to be there. But what they've done in the recent years, they've taken the balance away. So the important side, which is about the fans and the football and how it should be delivered, that's been kind of just pushed aside to a certain extent to more about how much money can we make, how much kind of profile can we get, and all this kind of stuff. And that's why a lot of fans feel like they feel rejected and they don't feel that connection with the World Cup anymore. We talked about Infantino, we've talked about Trump, we've talked about that. Listen, we're going to move on to another World Cup soon. The question will be, what lessons will be learned from this World Cup from them? Because to me, the negative PR around this World Cup, I've never seen so much negative PR. And if you're a company that's trying to maintain a brand, as they're trying to do, you don't want that. You might turn around and say, we're doing a great job. And they'll show you loads of Instagram clips, how the stadiums are full and people are happy. But I'm here and I'm talking to people. I was talking to people yesterday. When Infantino came on the screen yesterday, he got booed by the Mexicans. Interestingly, Jordan talked about the fact that the vibe isn't quite the same for international football as club football. I disagree with that because I was speaking to people yesterday, and when I went to Colombia, Colombian fans, oh my God, they're so excited about it. I watched their team play. They're not particularly very good, but they don't care. They still think they're going to win the World Cup. Haitian fans, they're so excited about the World Cup. You can see the Curacao fans dancing, and the players dancing off the plane. Listen, when you come out here, people do not care. The World Cup to them is everything.
I mean, Marcela, we saw Infantino yesterday at the press conference,
yes,
refusing to stand up for the Somali referee and basically saying, well, that's American immigration rules. We can't control it and we can't tell them what to do. I mean, where does that leave the standing?
I think there's been a really interesting shift in power away from FIFA. Jordan mentioned Blatter as a kind of evil that Infantino comes to replace. But in fact, Blatter was seen as the European sensible sort of improvement on Havelange, who was the Brazilian, who I heard actually at the time the British press would refer to as third world octogenarians. We can't have the game run by them. And you think, well, Why not? They created this monster.
Yeah.
You know, it was their idea to
That's just all
first away
British racism, but I mean,
well, racism, ageism, whatever you like. But you know, they were regarded like the absolute awfulness of the, you know, the most corrupt and sort of uncivilized. And I think they were. You know, I knew Grondona very well. I met Avalanche. I met Blatter. I've met Infantino very briefly. Every generation steps up as if they're going to sort of clean house and improve. And Infantino came with all that push that the FBI probe did and so on. FIFA is essentially a breakaway from the Olympic Committee, you know, who they regarded as untrustworthy. And their whole ethos, the remit is to make as much money as possible. That's what they exist for. At the same time, I think the monster kind of grew beyond their capabilities, you know. So they originally they just managed to get like Coca-Cola bottles and the static advertising behind a corner kick into the whole of the USSR where Coca-Cola was banned, but because the football was broadcast. And slowly they built these incredible relationships with big brands. And then they discovered, you know, they used to say to TV, would you please show our game? So then all these brands will get shown. And then actually they realized that it was a better idea to make TV pay for the honour. And what drives it all is the fact that we will not stop watching. And there's stats every World Cup, you know, 80% of men confess to not actually thinking about anything else for the duration of the tournament. We obsess with it. We get drawn in, maybe to a lesser or greater extent. Some people think World Cup fans are fair weather fans that don't watch their own club week in, week out. Some people think, oh, it fills with women and children who don't know anything about the game. Everyone wants to own it, to know more than the other. But the truth is, an enormous amount of the world's population actually loves it. And what I think is interesting in this case is that whereas FIFA has had this power to, if you remember, in South Africa, they instituted their own courts because they felt the South African justice system was too slow, so they wanted to be able to process quicker the people that they deemed needed fining or, you know, had committed a FIFA crime, which could be wearing the wrong logo or... in Brazil, they were scared about the violence, so they kind of insisted that the government put paramilitary police at the top of every hill, and every sort of favela had this PPP, which was called the Popular Paramilitary. And they do things. And I think in Qatar we saw the beginning of the last of that, where they thought that it would be fine for the captains to wear the rainbow armbands. They thought it would be okay to have beer. And shortly before the tournament kicked off, Infantino had to make that really odd speech, which you might remember, where he said, I'm gay, I'm Palestinian, I'm this, I'm that. Because he had to somehow say, I couldn't do it. The local government was more powerful than me. And that was a first. And now he's had to do it again. In spite of the peace prize of Trump and all this sort of Mar-a-Lago and all his, you know, elbowing the G20 he's personally, he wants to step into the world of power.
Yeah, I mean...
As an organisation, FIFA has had to bow down, and Trump has been proved to be the most powerful. And that's new, and that's also, I think, interesting as to how it goes forth, because we could see, if everybody switches the telly off at a half-hour, half-time and goes and does something else, then they'll have to recalibrate and go, oh, that's too long. But, you know, if we all tune in, then that's it. We're giving them what they want.
And we will. And men can only think
which is us.
One thing at a time anyway. So that explains your statistic. I mean, Jordan, it's worth talking about Trump here. I mean, you know, obviously this is a man who Infantino gave a peace prize to, the man who's currently at war. What do we think after the NBA spectacle and the embarrassment of being booed, Trump's approach to the World Cup might be?
Well, I think, I know that many people feel that Trump is unembarrassable. That was a phrase I remember someone using on Boris Johnson when he was the prime minister, and that he's just so brazen and he just doesn't care about what people think about him. He will still find ways in which to put himself at the forefront of the kind of the poignant and key moments during this World Cup. And I don't know if he particularly cares if he is even told beforehand, look, maybe you don't go to that game or that state or that stadium because you might get a bad reception. I'm not sure he cares about that. So I expect to see him quite a bit. I think alongside what we're seeing, the security threats to his life in recent years with the attempted assassinations, I think that could be the one thing that kind of quells how much visibility we see of him. But I think he sees this as his World Cup. We just heard Marcela saying that Infantino has had to, as powerful as he is, he's the president of the biggest sport on the planet, one that everyone loves. Even he has had to bow to Trump. And Billy mentioned, often it's talked about as the FIFA World Cup, but actually I think the Americans see it as, no, this is our World Cup for 6 weeks. We're in charge. It's our thing. You've got to do things our way. You're gonna get things through if they come through us. So I think he sees himself as the most powerful person on the planet right now in more ways than one. And I think he'll put himself out there when he pretty much wants. What I'm interested to know, though, is, or want you to see, is how he conducts himself in 2 years' time when the Olympics goes to the States. Because at least with, Infantino, he's the president of the biggest and most popular sport on the planet. He's got leverage to some degree. And even he can't bend the ear of President Trump. We're seeing in track and field, we're still very much in this kind of post-Bolt era where track and field globally is dying. So I want to see how the Olympics and the IOC, how they manage to, marry that relationship with the president, because I've heard people also say that with Infantino, you can criticize him all you want for, doing what Trump wants and being his lapdog. But actually, I've heard from people say that they think that is how other politicians should also deal with Trump, because you've got to play his game. You might have to look a little bit silly. You might have to give up a little bit more than you want. But ultimately, the bigger game or the bigger picture is, I want X, Y, and Z. You might have to go along with what he says. So I don't know if I agree with that, but I heard an interesting theory on that is the way you play Trump. You kind of give him what he wants. You make him feel like he's the most important person in the room, or in this case, in the world. And you might just end up getting what it is that you want.
Billy, what do you think we can conclude from the first two games about conduct on the pitch?
You mean the red cards? I didn't see. I have to admit, I didn't see the second game because I was too busy partying with the Mexicans at the Angel. But I did see the first game, and let's just say, conduct on the pitch. The South Africans, the South African team. Listen, I went to South Africa. I've been to South Africa, watched football there loads. Absolutely fantastic place to watch football. Great people. The team, I really wanted to do well, but I just didn't think they were good enough. Okay, and the Mexican team, again, I want them to do well again. So I just think that. I don't think there was any malice as such. You know what I'm saying? I just think that the quality of the teams wasn't good. And there was a couple of tackles out there. A lot of people saying that the referee, in one of the sending offs may have been a little bit dodgy, but you're always going to get that within football.
Last word, Marcela. What are you looking out for?
So I think part of the sort of project for FIFA and for world football generally, even club football, it has been for a number of years, if not decades, to seduce the American consumer. So break the market in the United States, which is really reluctant to sort of embrace the soul of our noble game the way most of the planet does. And one of the things that has always been highlighted as to why the American market, so not the Latinos in California or the, Asians in New York or whoever, the actual American pocket, is that it's too slow and not enough action happens and so on. So I think the four quarters has to do with that, and the new rules that foul and get sent off and cards and so on also has to do with that. They like set pieces, they like penalties, they like more goals, and we've had a lot more goals in Qatar already, if you think about it. We've got these weird new statistics that people measure, the VAR, all of that leads to stopping. You can change the odds of betting change during those stoppages. You can go and buy something. And to me, I've got the tradition of being Argentinian. And of course, there were no red cards at all until Ratin in 1966. No player had ever been kicked off a World Cup final until Monzon in 1990. So, we do things in such a way that the rules change. But to me, whether or not it's a sending off, but just the timing, if you're injured, if you're fouled, 30 seconds, that is part of this whole project to make the game as palatable as possible to an audience that's used to these long, drawn-out sports where a lot of things happen and the score changes. And because I'm a purist, I think it's a shame, but I suspect that, my kids' generation, Jordan's kids' generation will grow up loving this new form of the game. So you kind of, what should you do if there's a foul? What should you do if someone scores with a hand? Well, the game is organic. Over certain decades, we view it differently. It used to be, if the ref doesn't see it, there was no rule breach. That was the only, it was such a simple game. That's its beauty. I don't know how VAR and measuring and timing is going to affect it. I suspect, for me, it will be less interesting. I doubt it will be for young Jarrett-Bryan.
Well, on that note, Marcela, Jordan, Billy, thank you all very much indeed. Enjoy the next few weeks. That's the Fourcast. Bye-bye for now.